Imagine for a moment you arrived on this earth already whole, not in theory, but in structure, encoded with a pattern older than your breath, deeper than your name, a design more real than your doubts. You didn't come here empty, waiting to be filled. You came here with everything you need already inscribed within, the divine pattern of spirit itself, living quietly in you, awaiting recognition. As Emmet Fox once taught, the Christ is not an external savior, but an inner presence, a blueprint for awakened being, and this blueprint is not reserved for the saints. It is present in every soul, including yours now. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. You are not a seeker trying to find worth. You are a revealer of truth, awakening what was always there. The divine pattern isn't something to be earned, it's something to be uncovered. Just as an acorn already holds the image of the oak, you carry within you the complete code of your spiritual fulfillment. This pattern is not fragile. It is not hidden behind effort, guilt, or waiting. It is solid, alive, and precise. The universal law of divine imprint assures us that all life is born with its full potential encoded within, and your life is no exception. But why don't you feel that way? Because most of us were taught to trust external validation over inner knowing. You were told to strive, to compare, to wait your turn, to seek permission. But the Christ pattern doesn't respond to approval. It responds to awareness. What you become conscious of, you begin to embody. And what you embody, the universe must support. The law does not delay. It reflects your dominant pattern with clarity, without bias or exception. You don't need to be better. You need to be clearer. When you remember who you are, you stop entertaining false definitions of weakness, failure, or limitation. You begin to recognize the quiet strength that was always there. And that recognition starts to move through your mind, your body, your choices, shifting everything in your field. This is not about improvement. This is about revelation. Spiritual transformation begins with identity, not with fixing. You are not broken and never were. What appears as struggle is often a life out of sync with its true nature. When you live from the wrong pattern, borrowed beliefs, inherited guilt, conditioned fears, you suffer. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're out of alignment with what's real in you. The pattern of Christ, of divine sonship, of spiritual sovereignty, is not conceptual. It is architectural. It's structure. It's system. It's the spiritual DNA of the awakened life. And when you activate it, things don't just change. They come into order. The first principle of this pattern is remembrance. That's the law of recognition. What you identify as true becomes empowered. Your outer world begins to shift the moment your inner identity stabilizes. There's no delay in spiritual law, only delay in human permission. So ask yourself, what are you allowing the pattern to do? Are you letting it speak, move, influence, lead? Or are you still postponing your power, waiting for a sign that already lives in your cells, your body, your breath, your mind? They are all vessels of divine intelligence. You don't need to import something new. You need to release what's already in place. The Christ pattern is not mystical mist. It is divine geometry, coded into your being with precision, purpose, and presence. When you awaken to this, you stop striving and start directing, and the direction is inward. You stop asking for rescue, and you start commanding alignment. You no longer try to please the world. You begin to please the source within by becoming available to it. That's the shift, from seeking to serving, from confusion to clarity, from identity by default to identity by design. And what do you discover in that design? You are not ordinary, you are not small, you are not optional. You are an essential expression of the infinite, written into form, breathing divine substance, and capable of reflecting heaven on earth, not someday, but now. There is no future version of you more spiritual than the one reading this. There is only clarity or confusion. And clarity begins when you choose to believe that what Spirit made is good, complete, and fully equipped. Hold that. Let it land. Let it override the noise that tells you to wait for worthiness. You were not created to beg for favor. You were created to carry it. So begin now, not with effort, but with awareness. Let this be your affirmation, not repeated in desperation, but declared in knowing. The divine pattern is active in me. It is not missing. It is awakening through my consciousness now. Breathe into that. Stand in that. Because once you align with the pattern, the law begins to build your life accordingly. Christ is the code, not the character. You've been taught to look at Jesus as an exception. But what if he was the example? What if the life he modeled wasn't a pedestal to admire, but a prototype to embody? This is the revelation Emmet Fox pointed toward again and again. The Christ is not a biography, it's a blueprint. Jesus demonstrated what happens when divine pattern is fully accepted, fully lived, fully trusted. He didn't come to show you how to follow. He came to show you what it looks like when you remember who you are. The Christ isn't a man to worship. It's a state of consciousness to enter, and this state isn't reserved for mystics, prophets, or teachers. It's accessible to anyone who dares to release false identity and return to original design. The Christ pattern lives within every soul, not as an abstract metaphor, but as a functional spiritual framework. Here's the law. The law of mental equivalence. You can only receive and express what you inwardly match. The pattern must be met with recognition before it can be activated. The reason you don't feel the Christ pattern isn't because it's absent. It's because you're still identifying with a role the world gave you. You think you're a personality, a sum of experiences, a survivor of stories. But that's not your origin. Your spiritual identity precedes all that. You are not the clay. You are the divine intention that shaped it. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't claiming exclusivity. He was stating alignment. He spoke from the awareness that the source and the self are not separate, but synthesized, and so must you. But to do that, you must first unlearn. Unlearn the conditioning that told you power was pride. Unlearn the doctrine that painted divinity as distance. Unlearn the voice that insists awakening is for someone else. Because the moment you accept that the Christ is a pattern, not a person, you unlock your own permission to step into it. Not through perfection, but through presence. Not through memorizing teachings, but through living truth. The Christ pattern is bold. It doesn't whisper. It leads. It corrects. It aligns. It loves without weakness and moves without apology. It heals because it knows wholeness, and it creates because it knows source. You don't need to recreate that pattern. You need to remember it and choose to walk in it. You may feel hesitant. Who am I to claim this level of identity? But who are you not to? You've spent enough time in borrowed roles, trying to shrink to fit the room, apologizing for being intuitive, minimizing your knowing, diluting your brilliance to make others comfortable. That is not humility. That is self-abandonment dressed as kindness. Christ consciousness does not cower. It does not perform. It recognizes. It radiates. So recognize now, you are not a mistake, learning how to be spiritual. You are a soul remembering its structure, and the structure is sacred. You were not designed to merely admire truth. You were made to walk it out, in your tone, your choices, your presence, your practice. Not by trying to copy Jesus's path, but by living from the same awareness that you and the Source are one. This changes everything. You stop seeing prayer as asking and start seeing it as alignment. You stop waiting for confirmation and start creating from conviction. You stop obeying the world's image of you and begin expressing your original code. You're not trying to become the Christ. You are activating what was placed in you from the beginning. And with activation comes authority, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that directs. You gain authority over your thoughts, your reactions, your emotional atmosphere. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop doubting your intuition. You stop seeking outer symbols of what is already inwardly yours. And when that awareness stabilizes, life responds. Because consciousness is the cause of all experience. So pause now and affirm, not from ego, but from essence. I no longer worship the model. I live the code. I awaken the pattern within. Let those words shape the tone of your day. You are not rehearsing someone else's awakening. You are demonstrating your own. Thought is the first act of creation. Before anything takes shape in the outer world, it exists in the invisible realm of mind. Before there is form, there is idea. And before there is manifestation, there is acceptance. This is not philosophy, it is law. The law of mind action declares that what you think consistently with feeling and belief becomes the pattern the universe responds to. Your thoughts are not idle. They are not background noise. They are builders, structuring the unseen blueprint that determines your reality. You've been conditioned to believe that what happens around you is the cause. But metaphysical truth says, what happens around you is always the result. The origin of your life experience is not circumstance, it is consciousness. You are not just a thinker, you are a transmitter, a center of creative intention. Every thought you dwell on becomes a decree. Every idea you accept as true becomes law in your world. This is why awareness is everything. If you think in terms of lack, even if you speak of abundance, the law takes your inner agreement, not your outer performance. If you declare peace but nourish resentment beneath the surface, you're imprinting conflict, not calm. What you mentally rehearse, you energetically rehearse. The Christ pattern within you does not respond to words alone, it responds to alignment. And thought is the first place that alignment is established. Not because thought is the end goal, but because it initiates the energetic signature you live from. This is where many seekers stall. They study the truth. They even affirm the truth. But they don't embody the truth mentally. They don't examine what patterns are actually being rehearsed throughout the day. Those low-level assumptions about how life works, what's realistic, and who they believe they are at the core. Your life is not built by your intentions. It is shaped by your inner agreements, and thought is where those agreements are made. To shift your life, you must first shift your inner conversations. The ones that happen when you're alone, distracted, triggered, or doubting. These are not trivial moments. These are sacred entry points, the exact place where spiritual mastery is forged. You don't need to control every thought. That leads to spiritual rigidity. But you do need to guide your thought life with conscious awareness. You need to become the authority of your own mind, not the victim of its momentum. And how do you do that? By remembering your role. You are not your thoughts. You are the chooser of thought. You are the awareness that observes, selects, affirms, and releases. And the moment you reclaim that seat of choice, you begin to move from reactivity to response, from automatic patterns to spiritual precision. What you think about yourself is the most creative force in your life. If you consistently imagine yourself as powerless, the law cannot override that. If you assume you'll always be stuck, overlooked, or struggling, the law mirrors that assumption, not to punish you, but to fulfill your command. And yes, thoughts are commands. Every sustained thought is a blueprint. Every repeated assumption becomes a script. And every mental pattern you accept writes the story your life will tell next. That is why mental clarity is not optional. It is essential. The Christ pattern in you doesn't activate through wishful thinking. It comes online when you begin to think as one who knows who they are. When you consciously think from divine identity, not just about it. So instead of reacting to the world, you begin to create from the inside. You stop waiting for proof to believe, and you start believing as the act that produces the proof. You stop negotiating with reality, and you start writing it, thought by thought, belief by belief. This is not denial of the facts. It is declaration of the truth beneath the facts. When you begin to think in alignment with your divine pattern, your outer life begins to echo that precision. Doors open, timelines collapse, opportunities appear, not because you forced the outcome, but because you created the field for it to occur. So today, begin simply. Start where you are. Notice the thought currents that flow most often. Are they aligned with power or with fear? Do they rehearse limitation or expand vision? Do they speak from the pattern or from the wound? Then, without shame, begin to redirect. Not with panic, but with authority. You don't need to overpower the old thoughts. You just need to consistently replace them, thought by thought, layer by layer, until the new pattern becomes the dominant one, and the law has no choice but to reflect it. Affirm gently, affirm truthfully, affirm consistently. I think with clarity. I choose from alignment. My thoughts create my world, because they do. They always have. And now that you know, you're responsible for the reality you build, not in fear, but in freedom, because the power has always been in your hands, and your mind is the gateway to the life your soul already knows is possible. The inner image sets the outer frame. You are always seeing something on the screen of your mind, and that something becomes the template your world follows. Long before events show up in your life, they exist as patterns inside your consciousness. What you consistently imagine, feel, and expect becomes the architecture of your visible experience. This is not imagination for fantasy's sake. It's not daydreaming detached from reality. It's the law of mental imagery, the spiritual principle that form follows idea, and sustained vision shapes the field of what can materialize. Every system in the universe, from solar systems to cells, responds to structure. And the structure your life responds to begins with the image you hold of yourself and your world. That image can uplift or confine. It can release the Christ pattern or suppress it. Your task is not to make life obey you. Your task is to offer it a new frame. And the frame is built inside. When you see yourself as unloved, unsupported, or unqualified, that image becomes your energetic instruction. The law reads it like a blueprint and responds accordingly, not out of judgment, but out of perfect obedience. When you live from scarcity, you broadcast a field that attracts proof of limitation. When you see through fear, you unconsciously select paths that confirm it. But when you begin to hold an inner image of wholeness, when you stabilize the idea that you are enough, supported, chosen, empowered, everything begins to reframe around it. The outer world is elastic. It bends to meet your mental consistency. So the question is not, what do I want? The real question is, what do I continuously picture as possible, real, and true? Because what you consistently hold in mind, the law eventually holds in place. The Christ pattern in you cannot override an image of smallness unless you give it new substance to work with. You must become a conscious designer of thought, not a passive consumer of memory. This is why healing isn't just emotional, it's imaginal. You have to see yourself differently, not just feel better. You have to build a new image and persist in it, until the old one has nothing left to cling to. No more rehearsing scenarios where you fail, no more picturing worst-case futures, no more visualizing life as something to survive. Because every time you entertain those scenes, you imprint them onto the canvas of consciousness, and the law does not differentiate between what is feared and what is desired. It simply reflects what is emotionally believed. So now you begin again, with precision. You see yourself walking in peace, not panic. You see yourself making decisions from clarity, not doubt. You see your needs met, not as a fluke, but as a normal outflow of alignment. And the more you return to this image, the more it takes root. The more it takes root, the more it outpictures in form. This is not magic, it's mechanics. The subconscious mind, which directs 95% of your daily patterns, responds to imagery more than logic. That's why it doesn't matter how intelligent your surface thoughts are. If your inner picture contradicts them, the image always wins. So give it a new picture, build a new frame, draw from the Christ pattern within. Visualize yourself as one who trusts divine law, lives in divine timing, and acts from divine knowing, not once, but regularly, until the inner atmosphere becomes your default. Then life begins to shape itself to match. Even when things seem the same, stay loyal to the new image. That's how the old one dissolves, not by fighting it, but by replacing it. Hold this truth with conviction. My inner image is sacred design. I build what I believe. Life becomes what I consistently envision. Say it, sit with it, live it. Because vision is not passive, it is directive. And when the image stabilizes, the world synchronizes. Desire is how spirit speaks. That quiet yearning inside you, that persistent nudge that something greater is possible, is not delusion, it's not ego, it's not wishful thinking. It is divine communication, a sacred whisper from the Christ pattern within, alerting you to what's already coded in your soul. Desire is not the enemy of spiritual life. It is the invitation. You were taught to distrust your desires, to file them under selfishness, greed, or fantasy. But desire, in its highest form, is not a craving for more stuff. It's a calling for more expression, more truth, more alignment. It is the signal that your inner design is ready to unfold in fuller form. The law of divine desire reveals this principle. What you truly long for is not random. It's revelation in seed form. And the seed never shows up without the power to grow. To feel a desire for love, for creation, for impact, for clarity. That is spirit reminding you what you are here to express. Not chase, not obsess over, but live into. Not everything you want is yours to have, but everything you desire from the center of your being is yours to become. That distinction changes everything. Desire is not about accumulation, it's about activation. The Christ pattern doesn't push, it draws, it inspires. It speaks in signals that pull you toward your deeper yes. And when you follow that yes, not with frenzy but with faith, you begin to walk in alignment with your sacred potential. You don't have to wait until you're ready. Desire itself is the readiness. It doesn't ask for your perfection, it asks for your participation. So instead of suppressing your inner longing, start listening to it. Start treating it as holy data. Your desire to teach, to write, to love fully, to lead boldly, none of it is accidental. These are not side notes. They are spiritual instructions embedded in the framework of your being. Suppressed desire becomes distortion. Expressed desire becomes destiny. And here's the key. Desire alone isn't enough. It must be coupled with decision. The Christ pattern doesn't operate on passive wishing. It requires your willingness to follow the thread of desire with movement. You don't need to leap. You just need to lean in. When you lean in, the law responds. When you act on the signal amplifies. You will be guided, but not coddled. Spirit doesn't shout, it nudges. And if you're willing to honor even the smallest nudge, you begin to rewire your life from force to flow, from performance to partnership. This is the inner shift, from asking, "Is this desire allowed?" to declaring, "This desire is my alignment." You stop negotiating with your own soul. You stop filtering your dreams through other people's limitations. You stop waiting for proof and start living from permission. You realize the desire was never random. It was a reminder. And when you treat it as sacred, you stop disqualifying yourself. So ask yourself now, what have I been afraid to want? What desire have I silenced because it felt too big, too bold, too much? What if that very desire is your inner Christ code tapping from the inside, asking to be seen, heard, and followed? Desire is spirit knocking. Will you open the door? Say this aloud and mean it. My desires are not weakness. They are wisdom. I honor the call of divine becoming. This is how you begin to walk with power, not because you have everything figured out, but because you trust the voice within that says, "There is more," and it is yours to bring. So, walk with it. Let the desire be fuel. Let it clarify your choices. Let it shape your prayers. Let it write your days. Because every time you honor desire, you honor the Christ within. Faith aligns, not begs. Faith is not hoping something might happen. It's not pleading with the universe to intervene. Faith is knowing, and more than that, it is agreement. It is the inner posture that says, I already accept this truth as real. I already know the pattern is working. I already stand in alignment before the evidence arrives. This is the essence of the law of assumption. What you assume to be true consistently and without contradiction becomes the experience that forms around you. Faith doesn't wait for the conditions to change. It holds the pattern until the outer world matches the inner reality. Most people think of faith as emotional courage, something to fall back on when life is tough. But real faith isn't an emergency backup. It's the operating system of spiritual mastery. You don't reach for it only when you're desperate. You walk in it, live in it, think from it, until it becomes your default state. When you understand this, you stop using faith like a transaction. You stop trying to earn answers or bargain with spirit. You realize that nothing in this universe is withheld. It is only matched to your level of alignment. If you're begging, you're not believing. If you're doubting, you're not aligned. And if you're waiting for proof before you trust, you're postponing the very shift that brings the proof. Faith is forward consciousness. It doesn't lean on what happened yesterday. It leans into what is true always. And the truest thing about you is this: you are designed by divine intelligence. You are wired to succeed. You are made to reveal the Christ pattern here and now. But that design won't express through you until you believe it without conditions. Faith doesn't ask for signs, it becomes the sign. So when you feel fear, when uncertainty knocks, when the visible world says, it's not working, that is your moment. That is where faith begins, not in ease, but in decision. You get to choose what holds more weight, outer circumstance or inner certainty. You get to decide which voice you believe, the noise of the world or the knowing of the pattern. And once you decide, you must hold steady, not rigidly, but consistently. You don't need to feel strong in faith every second. You simply need to return to it faster, recalibrate quicker, reclaim your alignment before you spiral. You might wobble, you might doubt. But the moment you remember, I already chose this alignment, you're back in power. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It's the refusal to live from it. And here's what no one tells you. Faith is a skill. It can be trained. It can be strengthened. It can be deepened through practice, through awareness, through repetition. You practice faith every time you speak the truth in the face of appearances. Every time you move forward when the path isn't fully visible. Every time you declare, I trust the pattern, even when the pattern hasn't yet unfolded in form. That's not fantasy, that's function. And the law always supports function. When you align with truth, even if you don't see it yet, life begins to rearrange itself to match that signal. Not because you forced it, but because the signal became coherent. And coherence creates reality. So let your inner state stabilize. Let your assumptions be intentional. Let your identity match what you've declared. Because once your frequency becomes consistent, manifestation becomes inevitable. Hold this now, not loosely, but with clarity. I don't wait to believe. I believe, and the world aligns. Faith is my agreement with divine truth. Let this anchor you when you feel shaky. Let it remind you that power does not arrive when everything looks perfect. Power becomes visible when you choose alignment before certainty. Faith isn't about proving anything. It's about partnering with what is already true and allowing the law to do what it was always designed to do, respond to the one who knows. Imagination is the workshop of the real. Nothing you see in your external world came into being without first passing through the unseen corridors of thought. But not just thought, imaged thought, lived-in thought, embodied, emotionally charged vision, the kind of inner seeing that draws substance into form. This is where your true creative power resides. The law of mental imagery reveals this. Whatever picture you consistently hold in mind, especially when fused with feeling, becomes a directive to the universe. Your imagination is not an escape hatch, it's a divine tool, and like all tools, it shapes whatever you place in its grip. Imagination is not for entertainment, it is for construction. Everything is created twice, first in mind, then in matter. If you want to live a new pattern, you must first see yourself in that pattern. Not just casually, not just occasionally, but vividly, emotionally, and with conviction. Until the mental image becomes so familiar, your nervous system treats it as memory. This is not visualization for wish fulfillment. This is alignment with spiritual law. The Christ pattern does not emerge by willpower, it emerges by inner design. And the clearest way to activate that design is to imagine from it, not toward it. You don't visualize becoming powerful. You visualize being powerful. You don't picture success like it's far away. You picture it like it's your native rhythm. Why? Because the subconscious does not know the difference between what's vividly imagined and what's physically experienced. That's how deeply your inner images matter. They train your perception. They mold your posture. They tilt your choices toward the outcome you've already internalized. So what are you rehearsing internally? Are you picturing the worst just in case? Are you seeing your vision with disclaimers? Are you mentally retreating before you've even taken a step? Then understand this. It's not your life that's stuck. It's your imagination that's been hijacked by fear, and you have the authority to take it back. Your ability to imagine with clarity is your greatest access to divine partnership. Because when you image a thing as real, you begin to magnetize everything that matches it. People shift. Opportunities emerge. Timing syncs. This is not magic. This is mechanics, spiritual mechanics. The Christ pattern in you doesn't need convincing. It needs collaboration. And imagination is your side of that agreement. The clearer your inner image, the faster reality crystallizes around it. This doesn't mean you control every detail. It means you construct the field. You offer a vibrational scaffold for life to work with. And that scaffolding gets stronger every time you return to the same image with belief, not doubt. This is how transformation becomes your new normal. You picture yourself responding with grace instead of defensiveness, and over time, you do. You picture yourself waking with purpose, moving in rhythm, trusting the flow, and the rhythm appears. You picture your words landing with impact, your body moving with ease, your soul expressing without apology, and the outer world begins to reflect what the inner world finally believed. But this takes intention. Imagination is not passive. It must be directed, so stop leaving it to habit. Stop letting past pain write your future scenes. Take the pen back, see deliberately, feel fully, and return often. Even when nothing seems to be changing, especially then, you go back to the image, not to beg, but to build. Affirm this not as a technique, but as a truth. My imagination is sacred technology. What I build in mind becomes real in time. I live from the vision, not toward it. Let that guide you. You are not stuck. You are rehearsing. And now you choose to rehearse the truth. Feeling confirms what mind commands. You can think a thought. You can picture an outcome. But until it stirs your inner atmosphere, it's just a concept. The moment emotion enters, however, you've crossed into the territory of embodiment. And that's when things begin to move. This is the key to the law of vibration, the universal principle that everything in existence has a frequency, and your emotional state determines what range of reality you're tuned into. Thought is the spark, but feeling is the signal. Thought designs the blueprint, but feeling delivers the energy that tells the law. This is real now. Feeling is not just the result of outer events. It is the inner echo of your assumptions. It reveals what you truly believe, no matter what you say out loud. If you affirm abundance but feel fear, the law responds to the fear. If you declare healing but carry dread in your chest, your vibration communicates that expectation. This is why so many affirmations fall flat. They never touch the emotional body. They stay on the surface, clever, correct, but not charged. To feel is to claim, not just in words but in resonance. The Christ pattern in you doesn't respond to performance. It moves in coherence. When your thought, image, and feeling align, you enter the field of congruence, and creation accelerates. Not because you said the right phrase, but because your inner frequency finally matched the truth you wanted to live. So how do you work with feeling? You become aware of what you're rehearsing emotionally, not just intellectually. Are you practicing the emotion of possibility, or rehearsing the sensation of disappointment? Are you welcoming the vibration of fulfillment, or lingering in the familiarity of frustration? It's not about being positive all the time. That's not alignment. That's avoidance. True alignment means feeling what needs to be felt, then choosing the state that matches the life you intend to live. Not to fake it, but to train it. Because emotion can be trained. Feeling is not fate, it's muscle. And like muscle, it grows stronger with repetition. Every time you choose the vibration of calm over chaos, gratitude over lack, conviction over doubt, you are strengthening the energetic pathways that lead to transformation. This is why your inner atmosphere matters. You can't consistently live in the frequency of fear and expect the fruit of faith. You can't vibrate in resistance and attract ease. You must become the vibration of what you seek, not one day, but now. That's what embodiment means. You walk, speak, move, and make choices as if the thing were already yours, not as performance, but as pattern recognition. You match your emotional state to your inner truth, and the law matches it right back. When Jesus performed miracles, it wasn't by intellectual command, it was by spiritual certainty. He knew what he was aligned with. He wasn't guessing. And that inner knowing produced a field so powerful that physical matter conformed instantly. That same potential lives in you, not metaphorically, but energetically. You are capable of generating the emotional frequency that calls forth healing, provision, opportunity, and peace. Not by forcing a mood, but by choosing a state that aligns with the Christ within. So pause and feel. Not your wounds, not your old habits. Feel the power available right now, the quiet, steady, unshakable vibration of truth that says, I am safe, I am whole, I am guided, I am enough. Breathe it in, let it rise. Let it become the frequency you carry, not because it's flashy, but because it's true. Then affirm, not by routine, but with resonance. I feel what aligns with truth. My emotion confirms my direction. I vibrate in harmony with the life I am building. This is spiritual maturity, when your feelings stop reacting to outer shifts and begin aligning with inner design. From this place, you don't chase reality. You emit it. You transmit more than you try. You're always broadcasting something, even when you say nothing, even when you do nothing, even when you hide behind calm words and quiet smiles. Your being speaks louder than your voice. Your presence carries a signal. Your consciousness is an energetic beacon, and the world responds not to your effort, but to your essence. This is the principle behind the law of radiance. Whatever you are inwardly convinced of, you radiate. And what you radiate, you attract, amplify, or activate in the field around you. Not because of charisma, but because of coherence. Trying hard is not the same as transmitting power. You can try to seem confident, but if you're anchored in self-doubt, your field says otherwise. You can act kind, but if resentment simmers beneath the surface, your energy won't feel clean. You can speak abundance, but if you carry a silent agreement with lack, others will feel the dissonance, even if they don't know why. This is not about being perfect. It's about being authentic and aligned. You don't need to radiate joy all the time. You don't need to glow with perfection. But you must become aware of what you are really projecting, because life doesn't move according to your image. It moves according to your frequency. And your frequency is shaped by what you believe about yourself when no one is watching. You are a vibrational system. You affect rooms. You shift conversations. You influence timing, decisions, dynamics, just by being there. Not because you're trying to manipulate anything, but because you're always transmitting. So the question becomes, what signal are you offering the field? The Christ pattern doesn't shout. It radiates. The awakened being doesn't perform. They emanate. The energy of truth doesn't need to be explained. It is felt, immediately, undeniably, and often without words. When you're aligned, people trust you without knowing why. When you're misaligned, people hesitate, even if your words are perfect. Your work, then, is not to say more. It is to clean the signal, to clear away the static of self-doubt, the interference of people-pleasing, the noise of unprocessed shame. Because under all that, you are already a powerful transmitter of love, clarity, and intelligence. But power without clarity becomes distortion, and clarity begins with ownership. Own your field, own your influence, own the fact that you carry spiritual electricity, and that electricity either charges or short-circuits your environment. You don't need to try harder. You need to become clearer. When you're clear, your life flows. Not because nothing challenges you, but because your signal becomes so consistent, the law begins to move in predictable, stable patterns around you. This is where manifestation accelerates, not because of desperate declarations, but because the field recognizes your stability. Creation responds to coherence. When you're internally aligned, your energy is clean, and clean energy is magnetic. So instead of asking, "What should I do?" ask, "What is my being saying right now?" Am I walking into the room with unresolved fear or calm authority? Am I speaking from lack or from wholeness? Am I leading with anxious pressure or grounded presence? You don't need to fix yourself. You need to become more honest about your signal. And then refine it. Choose the state that reflects the version of you already living your vision, not from pretense, but from inner permission. Because the truth is, you don't have to wait to feel aligned. You can choose the vibration of alignment now. You can stand in it, breathe from it, act out of it, and your field will update immediately. This is the secret most miss. Transformation isn't just about mindset, it's about embodied frequency. So align your breath, align your posture, align your tone, align your motives, not to be impressive, but to be in integrity with your source, your truth, your pattern. Then say with calm authority, "I don't perform alignment. I live it. My energy leads before I speak." Let your signal go ahead of you. Because when you walk in spiritual coherence, the law clears the path for your arrival. Denial reclaims the power of choice. To build the life you're here to live, you must dismantle what no longer belongs. Not through force, but through clarity. Not by fighting shadows, but by refusing to feed them. Denial, when used correctly, is not repression. It is spiritual discernment in action. The law of substitution teaches us that you cannot hold two conflicting states of consciousness at once. You can't fully accept your divine identity while silently agreeing with the voice that says, "You're not enough." One must give way to the other. Denial is how you choose which one stays. This is not about shouting down your fears. It's about calmly revoking their permission to shape your reality. When something within you rises that contradicts truth, denial steps in, not as resistance, but as reset. The Christ pattern within you does not argue with lies. It overrides them with light. You reclaim your authority by identifying the thought that doesn't belong and refusing to lodge it in your system. Not with aggression, but with certainty. Denial says, "This idea has no root in me." And when you say that with conviction, the thought loses its grip. You may still hear the inner noise. You're too late. You never get it right. You're not ready. But hearing isn't agreeing. What matters is where you place your energy. What matters is what you allow to build momentum. When doubt arises, your power lies in your response, not in panic but in posture. You turn inward, you acknowledge the signal, and instead of rehearsing it, you pause and redirect. You assert what's actually aligned with your truth. You choose thought that opens, not thought that collapses. Denial creates that opening, not by suppressing emotion, but by filtering belief. You don't shut down what you feel. You release what no longer belongs in your framework of identity. To deny something spiritually is to say, I no longer subscribe to this as reality. It doesn't mean the pattern never shows up again, but every time you deny its authority, its influence weakens. Over time, your field clears, your mind becomes more still, and your energy stops contradicting your intention. This practice isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. You don't need to get it right. You simply need to stay awake to what you're feeding. When you catch yourself slipping into borrowed beliefs, trained fear, or inherited shame, you call it out. You name it. You release it. You make space for the Christ pattern to rise, not by fixing the past, but by saying, that version of me no longer writes this story. And here's the beauty. The more you deny what's false, the more space you create for what's true to take root. You're not just emptying, you're clearing for purpose. So, let your denial be grounded and gentle. Don't lash out at the lie. Stand in the truth so fully that the lie dissolves on contact. If a thought makes you smaller, you have every right to dismiss it. If a belief keeps you bound, you have every right to release it. You don't owe loyalty to anything that contradicts your divine design. Pause now. Scan your inner space. Where have you been tolerating distortion? Where have you quietly agreed to struggle, to fear, to self-rejection? Now, without list, without force, name the shift. This story no longer holds me. This voice no longer defines me. This fear no longer leads me. Breathe, set it down. Because every denial is also an affirmation of what's more real. You deny illusion not to fight darkness, but to create room for light. And the more you claim your right to choose your truth, the more your life begins to take the shape of that clarity. Affirmation is identity in action. You've heard that words have power, but it's not the sound alone that shapes reality. It's the source those words flow from. When you speak an affirmation, you're not casting a spell. You're making a claim of identity, and what you claim, over time, claims you. The law of identity expression reminds us, what you consistently affirm about yourself forms the architecture of your self-image. And your self-image, not your goals, sets the ceiling on what you allow, attract, and embody. An affirmation isn't a trick. It's a tool to establish alignment, not with ego, but with essence. You don't affirm to get something, you affirm to remember what's already yours by design. The Christ pattern doesn't need to be installed. It needs to be acknowledged. And every time you speak from your divine identity, you reinforce the signal that brings the pattern into motion. But this only works when you stop performing and start participating in your own becoming. Empty affirmations fall flat. Not because they're false, but because they're disconnected from your current energy. The goal isn't to say the right thing. The goal is to feel the alignment between who you truly are and what you're choosing to activate. A true affirmation doesn't just describe, it declares. You speak not to convince yourself, but to recommit, to realign, to remind your system that this is the reality you're choosing to live into. And with repetition, the declaration becomes embodied. You begin to think, move, choose, and speak as one who already holds what they've declared. You stop asking if you're enough. You stop performing for validation. You stop shrinking your presence to fit someone else's tolerance for your light. Affirmation then becomes second nature, not a ritual, but a rhythm. When doubt whispers, you speak truth. When the old story tries to return, you meet it with a new voice, not from force, but from familiarity. Because truth spoken enough becomes your new baseline. This is not about ignoring pain or bypassing healing. It's about refusing to build identity on what was never yours to begin with. Most of what you believed growing up was inherited, not chosen. But now, as a conscious creator, you reclaim the pen. You write new definitions, and affirmation is the ink. Start simple. Speak what feels clean. Don't reach for grandeur. Reach for realness. You might say, I am guided with clarity. My life reflects divine rhythm. Everything I need is within reach and within me. The words themselves aren't the power. The agreement is. When your words match your internal truth, even imperfectly, the Christ pattern responds. The law begins to mold form around your declaration, and over time, your lived experience rises to meet what you've chosen to affirm. But this requires presence. You can't just repeat lines like a mantra machine. You speak with awareness. You pause and feel the weight of your words. You let the vibration settle into your system, not as hype, but as remembrance. This is how you reprogram the subconscious, not by arguing with the old, but by feeding the new until it becomes your only truth. You may not feel it every time. That's okay. You don't need fireworks. You need consistency. Every conscious affirmation plants a seed, and the soul knows how to grow what is spoken from integrity. So ask yourself, what have I been affirming by default? Every complaint, every self-deprecating comment, every story about your limitations, those are affirmations too. The difference now is that you're becoming deliberate. You're no longer letting culture, memory, or trauma write your script. You're writing from the Christ within. You're speaking from your divine inheritance. You're building identity from blueprint, not from reaction. Let this be your inner posture. I speak as one who remembers. My words reflect who I already am. Each affirmation is an act of alignment. Don't chase results. Speak to reveal what already lives inside you. This is affirmation, not as wishful thinking, but as sacred authorship. And the more you speak from that place, the more your world begins to echo back the identity you've finally claimed. The word becomes flesh through motion. Spiritual truth is not static. It's not meant to sit on the shelf of your intellect. It must move through your body, your decisions, your tone, your relationships. Without embodiment, truth remains concept, and concept alone cannot transform a life. The law of correspondence in action teaches that the outer world will mirror not just your thoughts, but your behavioral alignment with those thoughts. When you act from the Christ pattern, even in small ways, you signal to the universe, I trust what I know. And that trust becomes fertile ground for manifestation. This is where so many seekers stall. They read, they reflect, they affirm. But when it comes time to act, to draw the boundary, to step into the role, to invest in the calling, they hesitate. They wait for signs, for permission, for the perfect moment. But motion is the sign. Movement is the bridge between idea and experience. You can't walk in newness while standing in fear. You can't claim your worth while tolerating spaces that dishonor it. You can't declare abundance while making choices rooted in scarcity. The law isn't fooled by language. It responds to integration. And integration only happens when truth moves through the body. This doesn't mean you act with pressure or urgency. It means you act with integrity. Every time you follow the inner nudge, even when it defies logic or history, you deepen the groove of the Christ pattern. You prove to your subconscious that you're no longer living from the old script. The goal is not speed. The goal is congruence. Are your choices echoing what you know to be true? Are your actions an extension of your revelation or an avoidance of it? This is the difference between attraction and demonstration. Attraction is magnetic, but demonstration is embodied authority. It is you becoming the living proof of the pattern you affirm. It is not forced. It's flow given direction. You may not feel fully ready. That's normal. The pattern does not require perfection. It requires participation. One aligned action, even if it feels small, carries more spiritual weight than 100 intellectual insights left unexpressed. Ask yourself, what would the awakened version of me do today? Would they procrastinate on the vision? Would they lower their standards to avoid discomfort? Would they ignore the promptings of intuition just to maintain the illusion of control? Or would they choose the step, even if it feels unfamiliar, because it matches who they've already claimed to be? You don't have to leap across the whole path. Just move one step in the direction of your truth. The law will meet you in motion. Timing, support, clarity. They flow to those who flow forward. This is the power of living from the inside out. When your outer behavior reflects your inner knowing, you create momentum. That momentum builds confidence, and confidence compounds into quantum change, not because of effort, but because of consistency. You are not a student waiting for spiritual graduation. You are a living principle, expressing itself in form. You are not being tested. You are being translated into action. So when the pattern speaks, listen. When the vision arrives, move. When the opportunity aligns, respond, not from fear, not from scarcity, from alignment. Affirm not with passivity, but with presence. I move in rhythm with truth. My actions reflect who I've become. The pattern lives through me now. Feel the shift that brings. This is embodiment, when knowing becomes movement, and movement becomes manifestation. The word becomes flesh the moment you stop waiting and start walking. Order is the framework of power. There is no lasting freedom without structure, no enduring breakthrough without boundaries, and no spiritual mastery without rhythm. The idea that flow and discipline are opposites is a myth that keeps many in cycles of chaos. The law of divine order reminds us all of creation is built on sequence, proportion, and timing. Stars don't scatter, they align. Oceans don't wander, they pulse with rhythm. Even your breath follows sacred structure. So too must your spiritual life. You are not here to drift in endless emotion. You are here to stabilize your energy in a pattern that allows power to move through you effectively, sustainably, and with precision. The Christ pattern within you doesn't resist order, it requires it. Spiritual energy, like electricity, needs a conduit. It needs a design strong enough to carry voltage. You don't get more power by trying harder. You get more power by becoming capable of holding it. That means structure. That means discipline. That means choosing systems that serve your spirit, even when they don't serve your moods. We often equate discipline with restriction. But spiritual discipline is not about control, it's about containment. It is choosing what aligns and discarding what distracts. It is organizing your life around what matters most so that truth has space to operate without interruption. You don't need to perfect every detail. You need to create enough coherence that your energy doesn't scatter. Structure protects your clarity. Order amplifies your signal. When you commit to practices that sharpen your mind, quiet your distractions, and ground your presence, you begin to hold the pattern consistently. And consistency, not intensity, is what unlocks transformation. The seeker who floats from one idea to the next never stabilizes. But the one who sets a rhythm, who moves in cycles of truth, reflection, and conscious action, builds momentum that can't be shaken by external chaos. Ask yourself now, where is my life leaking power? Where am I allowing disorder to blur my intention? Where am I confusing freedom with avoidance? Where have I let spontaneity replace spiritual structure? You don't need to tighten into rigidity, but you do need to create containers strong enough to support your expansion. Just as a river needs a bed to flow, your vision needs a frame to grow. Without structure, inspiration becomes noise. But with structure, inspiration becomes a current that carves through limitation and creates real movement in your world. The Christ pattern is a living rhythm. It breathes through you, but only when there's enough order to hold it without collapse. It doesn't flourish in overwhelm. It thrives in devotion. in repetition, in sacred routines that reinforce your truth day by day. This isn't about building a perfect morning ritual or scheduling your soul. It's about choosing where your attention lives, choosing how your days reflect what you say you believe, choosing to give time and space to the practices that remind you of who you are. Meditation, journaling, intentional speech, stillness, aligned movement, none of these are requirements. But all of them can become containers for power when approached with presence. Order brings clarity. Clarity brings momentum, and momentum brings results. Affirm not with pressure, but with precision. I build structure around what matters. I move with rhythm, not randomness. My power flows through divine order. Say it with intent, then live it with design, because the more structure you offer your spirit, the more effortlessly it can express. And in that expression, chaos finds its place. Confusion loses its grip, and power becomes not just an idea, but a lived reality. Love is the highest frequency of law. Above every principle, every method, every practice, there is love. Not sentimental, not selective, not based on agreement or mood, but universal, foundational, animating love. It is not just a feeling, it is the current through which all spiritual law flows. The law of universal love teaches us that when your consciousness aligns with love, every other law responds more fully, more freely, more faithfully. Love harmonizes, love activates, love dissolves distortion and makes truth visible. And that's why the Christ pattern is inseparable from love. Because Christ consciousness is not merely power, it is power that cares, power that connects, power that holds all things together, not through force, but through resonance. When you walk in love, you step into your highest identity, not because you're being virtuous, but because love is the frequency of coherence. It is the purest signal and the most magnetic force. Love reorganizes chaos. It softens resistance. It transforms presence before words are ever spoken. This is not about being agreeable. This is not about tolerating dysfunction. True love is clarity in motion. It sees what is sacred in others and in yourself, and refuses to shrink from it. When you anchor in love, you stop reacting from fear. You begin to respond from knowing. You no longer use force to assert truth. You become the presence of truth, and people feel it without explanation. Love leads, not by control, but by invitation. And that's what makes you powerful. When you bring love into your field, genuine, grounded, self-respecting love, your relationships shift. Not because you manipulated the dynamic, but because your frequency no longer matches dysfunction. You don't have to fix people. You simply stop resonating with chaos. You become a clear signal. And those meant to walk with you, grow with you, build with you, they rise to meet your vibration. Others may not understand it. Some may resist it. But you do not shrink to remain relatable. You lead with love because you are aligned with Source. You honor your own soul as fiercely as you honor another's. And that balance creates unshakable energy. Love doesn't coddle. It doesn't tolerate cycles that harm you. It doesn't say yes when the spirit says no. Love is not weakness. It is the boldest alignment available. The Christ within does not withhold love as punishment. It is love expressed as you. And every time you choose compassion over pride, forgiveness over retribution, grace over defensiveness, you tune into the same frequency that creates galaxies, not for the applause, not for the outcome, but because that's who you are when you're awake. So pause and scan your field. Where has love gone quiet, not because it faded, but because fear got louder? Where have you been withholding compassion from yourself? Where have you confused love with people-pleasing? Now come back, gently, honestly. Let love rise, not as an emotion, but as your standard. Let it guide how you speak to yourself. Let it shape how you release resentment. Let it inform how you take up space, not apologetically, but authentically. You don't have to prove you're loving. Just become the atmosphere of love itself. That's how the law flows with ease. Affirm now, not as performance, but as permission. I live at the frequency of love. It clarifies, heals, and directs me. Love is not what I offer. It's who I am. Let this recalibrate your field. Because when you walk in love, you walk in alignment. And when you walk in alignment, everything begins to respond accordingly. You are the living proof of principle, not because you try to be, but because the truth has always been there, beneath the doubt, beneath the striving, beneath the layers the world taught you to wear. The Christ pattern isn't something you ascend into. It's what awakens through you when the performance stops and presence takes the lead. You were never meant to accumulate truth as theory. You are designed to embody it, to walk it into the room, to become the visible echo of the unseen principle. The difference between seekers and revealers is simple. Seekers study the pattern, revealers live it. And living it means alignment on every level, not perfect behavior, but deep coherence. A way of thinking, choosing, and responding that reflects your source, not your conditioning. A rhythm that's no longer dictated by fear or approval, but by the quiet knowing that you are already connected, already equipped, already chosen. The Christ within doesn't argue to be seen. It expresses. It shows up in the way you carry silence, in the steadiness behind your words, in the decisions you make when no one's looking. It isn't loud, but it's unmistakable. That's the vibration of one who remembers. I am not my history. I am a demonstration of truth in motion. There's no need to explain yourself to those who can't feel your frequency. The shift isn't for applause. It's for alignment. You don't move from obligation anymore. You move from design, from rhythm, from clarity. Some will misunderstand. That's fine. You're not here to be digestible. You're here to be authentic. You'll say less and carry more. You'll release the weight of proving and stand in the strength of being. From this place, your presence transforms environments. Your stillness becomes a message. Your choices make a statement louder than any slogan. Truth lives here. No striving, no scrambling, no defending your right to rise, just embodiment. That's what real power feels like. Nothing forced, everything chosen. The Christ pattern doesn't rush. It aligns. It integrates. It becomes unmistakable, not because you push, but because you allow. In that allowance, you anchor a new standard, not only for yourself, but for the field around you. The world doesn't change when you master metaphysics. It changes when you become a living resonance of it. And now you do. You hold yourself to truth not for perfection, but for peace. You let go of the old scripts, not to feel good, but to stay clear. You speak, lead, respond, not to appear spiritual, but because there's nothing left to defend. This is what happens when you stop trying to be the light and realize you already are. So, breathe into this moment. There is no next level, only deeper recognition. Let the external catch up if it must. You're not chasing evidence anymore. You've become the source of it. Affirm quietly and mean every word. I walk as the truth I know. I embody the pattern I once searched for. The Christ is revealed through my being. Let it land. Because this is it. You're no longer practicing alignment. You are alignment. No more waiting, no more reaching, just remembering and living. Let this wisdom settle in your bones. You've listened not just to words, but to the truth already living inside you, ready to surface, ready to lead. Nothing more needs to be forced, only chosen. You are safe to receive now. Let go of the need to earn what's already yours. The Christ pattern was never outside of you. It didn't need to be found. It only needed your recognition, your permission. And now that you've returned to that knowing, everything else softens, clarifies, aligns. You are not a project, you are a presence. The truth does not need more defenders. It needs more demonstrators, more individuals who stop reciting truth and start revealing it with their entire being. That's who you've become. The work ahead is not effort, it's intimacy. Staying close to the center, listening when it's quiet, choosing the response that reflects your highest pattern, even when no one sees it. You're no longer led by fear nor pulled by approval. You've stepped into authorship, into embodiment, into the rhythm that creates change, not by demand, but by design. So as this message concludes, don't rush away. Stay here for a moment. Let it deepen. Let it rearrange something unseen. Let it clear what isn't real and fortify what always was. You're not becoming, you're revealing. And every moment from here forward is a new chance to live from that clarity. You are the Word made flesh. Breathe in your greatness.